Short girl was called useless by everyone, until the giant vampire king made her his fierce queen. The sun barely touched the village of Eldermore, leaving long, cold shadows between the crooked houses. The villagers moved slowly, their faces heavy with worry and suspicion. In this world of magic and monsters, strength and size meant survival, and anything smaller or weaker was looked down upon. Lyra, a short and fragile girl of 16, often felt invisible in this place. She walked through the dusty streets, carrying a small basket of herbs she had gathered from the forest. People whispered as she passed, calling her useless or little shadow. Some of the older children laughed at her, tossing sticks and mud her way. Lyra kept her head down, pretending not to hear, though the words stung like thorns. Her small cottage at the edge of the village was quiet. Her mother, a weary woman with gray-streaked hair, was tending to a small garden. She looked up when Lyra approached. "Lyra," her mother said softly, "don't wander too far today. There are dark things in the woods when the blood moon rises." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and longing. She did not like staying inside. She dreamed of adventure, of seeing the world beyond the village, even though the villagers called her worthless. "Why am I always so small? Why can't I be like everyone else?" she whispered to herself as she picked a few herbs. Her mother paused, looking at her with tired eyes. "Size is not the measure of worth, Lyra. Some of the strongest people are the ones you cannot see at first. Remember that." Lyra smiled faintly, but inside the loneliness weighed her down. No one in the village believed she could do anything meaningful. She was always overlooked, always ignored, always thought to be weak. That evening the sky began to glow red. The villagers murmured in awe and fear. It was the night of the blood moon, a rare and powerful event. Magic was said to stir in the world during this night, drawing supernatural creatures from the shadows. Lyra felt both excitement and terror as she watched the moon rise. Against her mother's warning, Lyra felt a strange pull toward the forbidden forest at the edge of the village. Trees twisted unnaturally, their roots crawling like living things. People said no one returned from there once the blood moon rose, yet something inside her urged her to step closer. She walked carefully, her small frame moving quickly between the thick trunks. The forest was alive with whispers. Shadows shifted and flickered as if the trees themselves were watching her. Lyra's heart pounded, but she forced herself to keep going. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the forest, and a dark figure appeared before her. He was enormous, taller than any man she had ever seen. His presence filled the clearing, and even the moon seemed to dim in his shadow. Lyra froze. This was no ordinary man. His eyes glowed like red embers, and his skin was pale, almost silver, reflecting the moonlight. A long, dark cloak trailed behind him, moving as though alive. "You should not be here," he said, his voice deep and calm like rolling thunder. Lyra's mouth went dry, but she managed to speak. I did not mean to, I was just curious." The giant figure studied her. Curiosity is dangerous for the small and weak. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. Every instinct told her to run, but something held her in place. There was a strange, magnetic pull from this mysterious being. Even though he radiated power and danger, she felt seen. I am Lyra," she said quietly. He bent slightly, tilting his head as if considering her. "Lyra," he repeated, "a name for someone fragile, but names can hold power if you have the courage to use it." Lyra's heart raced. She wanted to run, to flee into the forest, but his gaze was intense. There was something in it that made her feel small and yet important all at once. Who are you?" she whispered. "I am Kale," he said simply, "king of the night, guardian of the shadows." Lyra's eyes widened. She had heard stories of Kale, the giant vampire king, a creature of legend. No one dared approach him. He was known for his cruelty, for his strength, for ruling over those who dared not challenge him. And yet here he was, speaking to her without hostility. Why do you speak to me?" Lyra asked, barely believing she had the courage. Kale's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Because, little one, I see a spark. Most are blind to it, but you are small yet unbroken. That is rare. Lyra felt a warmth she had never known. Someone, a being so powerful, saw her for who she was. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but words failed her. Kale took a slow step closer. The world will try to crush you, Lyra. It will call you useless, it will ignore you, it will laugh at your size and weakness. But the world is not always right, and sometimes the smallest flame can burn the darkest night. Lyra shivered. The words felt like both a promise and a warning. She didn't understand what it meant, but it stirred something deep inside her, a courage she had never felt before. "Come with me," Kale said suddenly, "if you dare. There are forces moving in this night that will change your life forever." Lyra hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, warning her of danger, but curiosity and something else she couldn't name urged her forward. I will," she whispered. Kale's eyes softened ever so slightly. "Good. But be warned. Once you step into my world, nothing will ever be the same." They moved together through the forest, shadows stretching long across the ground. The trees seemed to part before Kale, as if recognizing his power. Lyra followed, her small hand brushing against the rough bark, her heart pounding with both fear and excitement. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time seemed different here. The air grew colder, heavier, filled with whispers and distant cries. Lyra felt small, insignificant, yet strangely brave. She realized that for the first time in her life, she was walking beside someone who did not see her as useless. At last, they reached a clearing. There, in the middle of the darkened forest, stood a castle unlike any she had ever imagined. Towers reached high into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. Black stone gleamed under the blood moon, and flickering lights hinted at figures moving inside. "This is my domain," Kale said, gesturing to the castle. "Few live to see it, fewer survive it, and even fewer like you are welcome here." Lyra's eyes widened. The castle was terrifying and beautiful all at once. She wanted to turn back to flee, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. She had never seen anything so grand, so powerful, so alive. Kale stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You will learn, Lyra, that the world is harsher than your village. But you may be stronger than even you realize." Lyra swallowed hard. I hope so." Kale's eyes glowed in the moonlight. "Hope alone will not be enough. You will need courage, intelligence, and heart. And even then, the night is full of dangers you cannot yet imagine." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. Fear mixed with determination, and for the first time she felt like she had a purpose. Someone powerful believed in her, and perhaps that was enough to begin changing her life. Suddenly, a distant scream echoed through the forest. Lyra flinched, Kale's eyes narrowed. "They are coming," he said, his voice low and commanding. "The darkness is moving faster than I anticipated. You must be ready, Lyra. The night does not forgive weakness." Lyra took a deep breath. She did not know what lay ahead, but she knew she could not turn back. Not now. Kale extended a long, pale hand. "Will you trust me, little one?" Lyra hesitated, looking at his imposing figure. Then, with a resolve she had never felt before, she placed her small hand in his. "I trust you," she whispered. Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good, then follow me. And remember, the world called you useless, Lyra, but in my eyes you are just beginning." As they stepped toward the looming castle, the blood moon reached its peak, casting a crimson glow across the land. Shadows seemed to twist and move of their own accord. Lyra's heart raced with fear and excitement. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but she knew one thing: her life had changed forever. Above the castle, a pair of glowing eyes watched them from the highest tower. The owner of the eyes was unknown, but a low, chilling laugh echoed in the night, hinting at dangers far greater than Lyra or Kale could yet imagine. And in that moment, Lyra realized that being small, being underestimated, being called useless, might just be the greatest advantage she had in the dark world ahead. Cliffhanger. The night was alive, and something ancient was awakening. The castle loomed over Lyra like a dark mountain. Its black stone walls seemed to drink the moonlight, and the air around it vibrated with an almost magical hum. The gates were enormous, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The wind howled through the towers, carrying whispers of a past that had long been forgotten. Lyra's hand remained in Cale's as they crossed the courtyard. Despite her fear, she felt a strange warmth in his presence. He was massive, taller than any man she had ever seen, yet careful not to crush her small hand in his own. "Do not be afraid," Cale said, his voice low but steady. "This castle has protected many for centuries, and it will protect you as well, if you respect its rules." Lyra nodded, swallowing her fear. Her legs felt weak under her, but she tried to keep her steps steady. I will follow your rules," she said softly. Cale led her through enormous doors into a hall that seemed endless. Shadows flickered along the walls as if alive. The floor was polished black stone, reflecting the red glow of the blood moon outside. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never seen anything so grand and yet so intimidating. "This place, it's incredible," she whispered. Cale glanced down at her, his expression unreadable. "It is my domain. Few deserve to walk here freely. Most are too fearful, too weak, too insignificant." Lyra felt her heart beat faster. She wanted to shrink back, to hide, but she held her ground. Something in Cale's eyes told her that he expected her to stand, not run. They passed through corridors lined with towering statues of past kings and warriors. Some statues were human, others monstrous, their faces frozen in expressions of power and fear. Lyra shivered. Who are all these people?" she asked. "They are my ancestors, warriors and rulers of shadows," Cale said. "Some lived centuries, some died young. All are bound to this place, and all have served their purpose. You little one may also find a purpose here, if you have the courage." Lyra felt both awe and unease. She had been called useless her entire life. No one had ever said she could have a purpose, let alone in a place like this. Cale led her into a smaller chamber, candlelight flickering against the walls. The room was filled with ancient books, maps of the kingdom, and strange artifacts she could not name. He gestured to a chair near a desk, but Lyra hesitated. "Sit," he commanded softly. She obeyed, noticing the faint red glow from a window that looked out over the forest. Shadows moved below, as if the trees themselves were alive. "Tell me, Lyra," Cale said, his eyes studying her closely, "what makes you different from the others in your village?" Lyra thought for a moment. I am small, yes," she said quietly. "People say I am weak, but I try my best. I think carefully before I act. I notice things that others do not. I care, even when no one else does." Cale's eyes seemed to study her deeper than before. For a moment the silence between them was heavy, almost suffocating. Then he spoke, his tone softer, almost approving. "Interesting," he said. "You are small, yet you notice details others overlook. You are timid, yet your heart beats fiercely. This is rare. Most humans waste their lives believing power is only in size or strength. You may prove otherwise." Lyra felt a warmth rise in her chest. Cale, the terrifying king of shadows, actually saw her. He understood something about her that no one in her village had ever noticed. Just as she was about to respond, the doors to the chamber burst open. A group of the castle's guards entered, their faces hidden beneath dark helmets. "Cale," one of them said, bowing deeply, "the northern border has been breached. Strange creatures, half shadow, half animal, are attacking the villages near the forest. We cannot hold them alone." Cale's eyes darkened. "Then we move. Lyra, stay close. You must learn quickly, for the world outside this castle is far more dangerous than your village. It will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Lyra felt fear twist inside her. She was just a small girl, untrained in combat or magic. How could she possibly survive in a place filled with monsters and darkness? But when she looked at Kale, she noticed a steady, calm strength in him. Somehow, it made her feel she could face more than she thought possible. They left the castle together, Kale walking like a shadow among the trees, Lyra following closely. The forest was alive with movement. Strange sounds echoed, leaves rustled as if something, or many things, were moving just beyond sight. Suddenly, a creature lunged from the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, with glowing eyes and claws sharp as swords. Lyra froze, but Kale moved faster than she could comprehend. With a flick of his hand, the creature was thrown back, disappearing into the shadows. Lyra gasped. You are incredible," she whispered. Kale did not respond immediately. He looked at her, not with anger or condescension, but as if measuring her reaction. "You must learn," he said finally. "That strength is not just about power. It is about control, timing, and knowing when to act. Observe, learn, and you may survive." Lyra nodded, determined to prove herself. She knew she could not remain the useless girl any longer. If she wanted to live in this world, she had to grow stronger. As they continued, Kale spoke to her of the history of the kingdom. He told her of curses placed on the land, of kings who had fallen to darkness, of creatures that lurked in shadows, and of the delicate balance between light and dark. Lyra listened, fascinated and frightened. Every word painted a world far beyond the narrow life she had known. Finally, they returned to the castle as dawn approached. Lyra was exhausted, her small body trembling from the night's journey, but her mind was alive with new understanding. Kale guided her back to the chamber and she sank into a chair, almost unable to stay upright. "You survived your first night," Kale said, his tone almost gentle. "Few humans last this long in the shadow of the castle. Most run, scream, or fall to despair. You endured. That alone marks you as different." Lyra looked up at him. I want to learn, I want to be strong." Kale's eyes softened in a way that few had ever seen. Strength comes in many forms. Not all are measured by power or fear. Some come from courage, some from intelligence, and some from heart. You, Lyra, may have all three if you are willing to embrace them. For a moment, Lyra felt a surge of hope. She had spent her life believing she was nothing, but now perhaps she could be something. Perhaps she could be more than useless. The next days passed in a blur of lessons and challenges. Kale taught her to observe, to anticipate, to listen to the world around her. She learned the subtle language of shadows, the way the castle itself seemed to breathe and respond to its master. She practiced moving silently, speaking in whispers, understanding creatures that lurked unseen. Every day was exhausting, but Lyra began to grow in confidence. Kale's approval, rare and measured, became a guiding light. He was not cruel, but neither was he easy. Every mistake she made was noted, every success quietly praised. She realized that in his eyes, she was not the useless girl the villagers had mocked. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the blood-red forest, Lyra asked the question that had been haunting her. "Kale, why did you choose me? Why did you even notice me when everyone else ignored me?" Kale's eyes were distant, staring into the dark horizon. "I have watched many humans," he said slowly. "Most are blind to the truth of the world. They fear what they cannot see, but you do not hide from it. You face it even if you tremble. That is rare. That is strength." Lyra's heart swelled. She had never felt truly seen before, not by her village, not by anyone. And yet, here was a being of unimaginable power telling her that she had value, that she could be something more. But Kale's expression darkened again, as it always did when he thought of the world outside the castle. "Do not be foolish, little one," he warned. "The world will still test you. Shadows are patient. Darkness is cunning. And the creatures of night, they do not forgive weakness." Lyra nodded, determination burning in her chest. She would face whatever came next. She would not be the useless girl anymore. That night, as she lay in a small room in the castle, she could hear whispers from the shadows outside. They spoke in a language she could not understand, yet she felt their intent, watching, waiting, testing. Her heart raced, but she no longer felt helpless. She had Kale by her side, and she had begun to understand that even someone as small as her could wield courage. Then from the corner of the room a shadow moved. Not a creature, not Kale, but something else entirely. It paused, and Lyra felt its eyes on her, bright and hungry. The last thought that crossed her mind before sleep claimed her was a mix of fear and excitement. The night is alive, and I am not alone in it. Cliffhanger. Its intentions were unknown, but its presence promised danger. And deep in her chest, Lyra felt a thrill she could not explain. The world was larger, darker, and far more alive than she had ever imagined. The castle had grown quieter in the days following the attack near the forest. Lyra moved through the halls with a confidence that surprised even herself. No longer trembling at every shadow, she now walked with alertness and purpose. Kale watched her closely, noting how her small form carried herself through corridors that had once made her shiver. "You are changing," he said one evening as they stood in the training hall. The hall was vast, filled with weapons, armor, and strange magical relics. Torches burned with blue flames, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Lyra nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead. She had spent hours learning to move silently, to defend herself, and to recognize even the slightest disturbance in the air. I want to be stronger," she admitted. "I don't want to be the useless girl anymore." Kale's red eyes softened. "Strength is not always measured by size, Lyra. Some of the strongest are those who can endure fear, who can think when others panic, who can act when hope is fading. You are learning that." Lyra felt a surge of pride. For the first time, someone powerful believed in her. The idea that she could matter, that she could make a difference, filled her with energy she had never known before. But the night had its dangers. Even as she trained, whispers echoed through the castle, carried on the wind. Shadows moved unnaturally and strange. Low growls occasionally broke the silence. The creatures that had attacked the villages were only the beginning. One evening, while Kale was reviewing maps in his chamber, Lyra wandered into the castle's library. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with books of forgotten magic, history, and forbidden knowledge. She ran her fingers over the spines, feeling the weight of centuries of secrets. A particular book caught her eye. It glowed faintly in the dim candlelight. She pulled it from the shelf and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams of the human heart, both literal and magical. As she studied, a strange warmth spread through her chest. The words seemed to hum with energy, and images of creatures, curses, and protective spells danced in her mind. Lyra realized that she could feel the magic coursing through her, responding to her presence. Just then, Kale entered the library. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the glowing book in her hands. "You have found the Tome of Shadows," he said quietly. "It chooses who can read it. Few humans can unlock its power. It seems it has chosen you." Lyra's eyes were wide. "Me? But I don't know magic." "I'm not like you," Kale shook his head. "Magic is not only about strength, Lyra. It is about connection, listening to the world, understanding its rhythms, and knowing when to act. You have that ability. Few others do." Over the following days, Lyra devoted herself to learning from the tome. She practiced spells of light and shadow, protective wards, and ways to sense danger before it arrived. Kale supervised, testing her patience, intelligence, and courage. He did not show praise often, but when he did, it carried weight deeper than any words could. One night, as the blood moon rose again, a warning came from the castle's guards. A group of shadow creatures had breached the outer walls. They moved faster and smarter than the last attack, and it was clear that something had changed. They were being guided. Lyra's heart raced. She had trained, but she had never faced real danger like this. Kale approached her, calm and commanding as ever. "Do not panic," he said. "Remember your training. Observe first, act second. The creatures feed on fear. You must not give it to them." Lyra nodded, gripping a staff that she had enchanted herself using lessons from the tome. She felt a new sense of control. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. Together, they moved through the castle halls, Kale's presence a steady shadow by her side. As the creatures reached the main courtyard, Lyra focused, letting her magic flow. Light erupted from her staff, forming protective barriers that slowed the creatures and pushed them back. Kale moved with precision, his own powers striking down attackers with speed and strength. Lyra watched, learning from every movement. She realized that she was not just a student, she was becoming a fighter, a protector, a small force capable of influencing the outcome of a battle. After the fight, the courtyard was quiet again. The creatures had fled, but the danger was far from over. Lyra's small hands trembled not from fear but from exhilaration. She had faced something terrifying and survived. Kale looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, he smiled fully. "You did well, Lyra, far better than I expected." Lyra's cheeks flushed. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Kale's eyes softened. "Perhaps, but you acted. You chose to face fear rather than run. That is the difference between the small and the strong." Over the following weeks, Lyra's bond with Kale deepened. She learned not only magic and combat, but also the subtleties of leadership. She observed how Kale interacted with the castle's guardians and spirits, how he commanded respect without cruelty, how he balanced fear and fairness. One evening, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the dark forest, Lyra asked a question she had been holding inside. "Kale, why do you trust me? I'm still small, still learning. The others, they wouldn't have survived in your world." Kale's gaze was distant, fixed on the horizon where the moon touched the treetops. "I trust those who see the world clearly," he said quietly. "Most humans are blind to what is around them. They panic, they falter, they fail. But you notice, you think, you endure. That is why I trust you." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she truly believed in herself. Perhaps she could be more than useless. Perhaps she could be strong, even in a world of giants and shadows, but peace was fleeting. The shadows that had attacked before were not gone, they were only waiting. One night, as Lyra practiced her magic in the courtyard, a whisper of a voice reached her ears. It was soft, almost like the wind, but filled with menace. "You think you are ready, little one," the voice hissed, "but you know nothing of the darkness that approaches." Lyra froze. Her heart raced, but she stood firm. She felt a new strength inside her, a fire that had been growing with every lesson, every battle, every challenge. Kale appeared at her side, his eyes scanning the darkness. "They are coming," he said, "and you must be ready. The world will not forgive hesitation. Remember your training, trust yourself, trust me." Lyra nodded, gripping her staff tightly. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned courage, resilience, and focus. She was no longer the girl who trembled at shadows. She was becoming something greater, something powerful. Days later, Kale took her to the castle's ancient hall of mirrors. The hall was vast, the walls lined with tall mirrors that reflected not only images but memories. Lyra's reflection shimmered strangely in the glass. "These mirrors show more than appearances," Kale explained. "They reveal truths, your strengths, your weaknesses, and sometimes the paths you might take. Look closely, Lyra." Lyra approached a mirror cautiously. As she stared, images flickered across the glass. She saw herself, small and fragile, being laughed at by villagers. Then she saw herself fighting shadow creatures, casting spells, and standing confidently beside Kale. Finally, she saw herself standing alone, facing a massive darkness, not afraid. Her chest swelled with pride. She had grown. She had transformed. And yet the final image was unclear. A shadow loomed behind her reflection, unseen but threatening. Kale's voice broke her focus. "The mirror shows what is, what was, and what may be. You are strong, Lyra, but the night is endless. There will always be more challenges, more shadows. That is the truth of our world." Lyra nodded. She had faced fear, danger, and doubt, and she had survived. But she understood now that her journey was only beginning. The castle, the shadows, the kingdom, all of it demanded strength, courage, and heart. That night, Lyra lay awake, listening to the whispers of the castle and the rustle of the forest beyond. She could feel the world alive with magic and danger. And for the first time, she did not feel small. She was no longer the girl everyone called useless. She was learning to be a warrior, a protector, a fierce presence in a world of darkness. And though shadows would come, she knew she could face them, with Kale by her side and with the fire growing inside her own heart. But as the night deepened, a new presence arrived at the edge of the forest. Silent, patient, and hungry. Its eyes glowed like twin embers fixed on the castle. It had been watching Lyra's growth, and it was coming. Cliffhanger. She gripped her staff tighter, her pulse racing. Kale appeared at her side, his expression hard. "They are coming," he said, "and this time they will not wait for mistakes." The castle stood silent under the blood moon, its towers casting long, dark shadows across the forest. Lyra stood on the highest balcony, her small frame firm, her staff in hand. She had grown so much since the night Kale first brought her here. The timid, useless girl who had trembled at shadows was gone. In her place was someone sharper, braver, and stronger, a girl ready to face the darkness that was now approaching. Kale appeared beside her, his towering presence comforting yet commanding. "The creatures you sensed, they are stronger than the ones before," he said, his deep voice carrying over the courtyard. "And they are not alone, something more ancient guides them." Lyra's heart raced, but she did not falter. She had trained. She had learned. She had faced fear and found courage. "Then we stop them," she said, her voice steady. "We protect the castle, the kingdom, and the people." Kale studied her. For a moment, his usually unreadable expression softened. "You have learned well, Lyra. I trust you. Not just as my student, but as my queen." Lyra blinked, taken aback. "Queen?" "Yes," Kale said, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You are fierce, intelligent, and brave. You command not with cruelty, but with heart. That is what makes a true leader. Tonight you rise as my queen, not only by title but by action." Lyra felt a surge of pride and determination. She had never imagined anyone would see her this way. And yet Kale's trust was real. She would not fail him or herself. The first signs of the attack appeared just as the moon reached its peak. Shadows twisted in the forest, forming creatures more terrifying than any she had seen. They moved with intelligence, coordinating their attacks, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Kale raised his hand, summoning a protective barrier around the castle. Lyra mirrored his movements, casting her own wards. The magical energy thrummed beneath her fingertips, a pulse that she had learned to trust. "They are testing us," Kale said, his voice steady. "Do not falter, Lyra. Lead when needed, act when necessary. You are ready." Lyra nodded. She moved forward into the courtyard, her staff glowing with her own power. The creatures hesitated at the barrier's edge, sensing the strength within her. She could feel it, the fire of courage, the sharpness of thought, the heartbeat of determination. The first wave attacked. Shadows lunged from every side, claws scraping against the protective wards. Lyra focused, sending pulses of energy to push them back. Kale moved beside her, striking with precision and force. Together, their powers intertwined, a combination of raw strength and clever strategy. Lyra began to feel a new confidence. She directed the castle's guardians, gave commands, and anticipated the creatures' moves before they happened. Each spell she cast, each movement she made, demonstrated her growth. She was no longer the useless girl the villagers had scorned. She was a warrior, a leader, a queen. Hours passed, the battle raging without pause. Lyra and Kale worked together seamlessly, their bond of trust and understanding stronger than any weapon. The creatures, though relentless, began to falter under their combined strength. At last, a shadow unlike any before emerged. It was enormous, ancient, and covered in a dark mist that twisted around it like living smoke. Its eyes glowed brighter than the blood moon, and its presence radiated hunger and malice. Lyra froze for a moment, her pulse quickening. Even Kale's expression darkened as he faced this creature. "This is no ordinary enemy," Kale said quietly. "Lyra, you must trust yourself more than ever. Lead, or we may both fall." Lyra gritted her teeth and stepped forward. She could feel the power within her, the lessons, the growth, the courage. She would not falter. "We stop it," she said firmly. "Together." Kale nodded, and for a moment they stood side by side, the giant vampire and the small girl who had become his fierce queen. Their energy intertwined, light and shadow blending, creating a force the creatures could not match. The battle was fierce. Lyra used every spell she had learned, anticipating the creature's moves, striking when it was vulnerable. Kale struck with force and precision, his power immense and unstoppable. Slowly, the shadow began to weaken, its movements slower, its presence less commanding. Lyra took a deep breath. She focused all her energy, casting a spell of binding and light. The ancient shadow screamed, thrashing against the magic, but it could not break free. With one final pulse it was sealed, disappearing into the night, leaving the forest still and quiet once more. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. She had faced the impossible and survived. She had led, she had fought, she had proven herself. Kale approached, his towering figure casting a long shadow over her. He knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You have done more than survive, Lyra. You have risen. You are fierce, brave, and wise. You are not just my queen by title, you are my queen by heart." Lyra looked up at him, her chest still heaving. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. She had grown from the useless girl into someone who mattered, someone who could protect, someone who could lead. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice quiet. Kale shook his head, a faint smile crossing his lips. "You could have. You chose to act. That choice makes all the difference. You have your own strength, Lyra. Never forget that." The castle, once a place of fear and shadows, now felt alive with energy. The wards glowed brighter, the guardians stood taller, and the air hummed with magic. Lyra had become a part of it, and it had become a part of her. Over the next days, life in the castle began to change. Lyra trained harder, studied deeper, and worked alongside Kale to restore the balance of the kingdom. She met the courtiers and guardians with confidence, earning their respect through courage and wisdom rather than fear. She also discovered new parts of herself. She was brave, clever, compassionate, and fierce. She could command respect, inspire loyalty, and act decisively. And through it all, Kale remained by her side, not to protect her but to guide her, to trust her, to see her rise. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the kingdom, Lyra spoke quietly. "Kale, I never imagined I could be this. I never imagined anyone would see me as capable, strong, important." Kale's red eyes softened. "You were always capable, Lyra. The world simply did not know it. But now, you know, and that knowledge will carry you further than fear ever could." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. She had grown, changed, and transformed. She was no longer the small, frightened girl who had been called useless. She was a queen, fierce and wise, ready to face whatever the future held. But even in victory, she knew the shadows were never truly gone. The world was full of danger, darkness, and challenges that tested even the strongest. Yet she did not fear them. She had Kale by her side, she had her own strength, and she had the fire of courage burning inside her. As the blood moon set and the first light of dawn touched the castle towers, a faint movement caught her eye. From the edge of the forest, a pair of glowing eyes watched silently. The figure stepped back into the shadows, patient, waiting, observing. Lyra felt a thrill of anticipation. The world was vast, mysterious, and alive, and she was ready. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have faced darkness and grown stronger. But remember, Lyra, the night is eternal. There will always be challenges, always be shadows. That is why we remain vigilant, always learning, always growing. Lyra nodded, determination shining in her eyes. I understand, and I will face them. I am ready. Kale smiled faintly. Good, then you are truly my queen. Together they stood on the balcony, looking over the kingdom. The forest, the castle, and the distant villages lay bathed in dawn light. The night had tested them, but they had endured. And though dangers would come again, Lyra knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer useless. She was powerful, courageous, and fierce. She was a queen. And in the quiet of the morning, the castle seemed to whisper its approval, the shadows retreating, if only for a moment. Lyra and Kale, united in trust, courage, and strength, faced the new day together, ready for whatever challenges awaited. The kingdom was theirs to protect, the night theirs to command, and the future theirs to shape. For the first time, Lyra felt truly alive.